everyone, and welcome back to Learning English Studio, where learning English is easy and fun. I'm Amelia.
Hello, Amelia. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here.
Hi, James. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. And you look very happy today.
I am very happy today. I'm excited for our topic today.
Oh, yes, it's a very good topic, very important.
Yes, exactly. But before we start, everyone please remember to subscribe to our channel. Yes, and click the like button, and please share our podcast with your friends and family. It helps us a lot. It really does. Okay, so James, are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready, Amelia. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day.
Perfect. Today, we're going to talk about something that we all do every day, talking about what happened yesterday. This is such a fundamental skill in English, but I know many learners find the past tense a bit tricky.
That's so true. The past tense is one of those things that can seem complicated at first, but once you understand the patterns, it becomes much easier. And it's something you'll use every single day in English conversations.
Absolutely. Think about how many times someone asks you, "How was your day?" or "What did you do yesterday?" Being able to answer confidently is such an important skill.
Exactly. And that's what we want to help our listeners with today. We're going to break down the past tense in a simple, easy to understand way with lots of examples and practice.
I love that, and we'll make it fun and practical with real-life examples that you can use right away. So let's start with the basics. When we talk about yesterday, we usually use the simple past tense, right?
Exactly. The simple past is used for completed actions in the past. So instead of saying, I wake up at 7 a.m., present, we say, I woke up at 7 a.m., past.
That's such a clear example, and I think it's helpful to know that there are regular verbs and irregular verbs in the past tense. Regular verbs end in ed, like walked, talked, or played.
That's so true. And irregular verbs have special forms, like went from go, ate from eat, or saw from see. These just need to be memorized, I'm afraid.
That's such an important point. Irregular verbs can be tricky because they don't follow a pattern, but the good news is that the more you use them, the more natural they become.
Absolutely. And today we'll practice lots of common irregular verbs so our listeners can get more comfortable with them.
Perfect. So let's start with a simple example. James, what did you do yesterday morning?
Well, yesterday I woke up at 7 a.m. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom. I brushed my teeth and washed my face. Then I went to the kitchen to make coffee.
That's a great example. I noticed you used several irregular verbs: woke, got, went, brushed, washed, and made, and you used them all correctly.
Thank you. It comes with practice. What about you, Amelia? What did you do yesterday morning?
Well, yesterday I woke up at 6:30 a.m. I took a quick shower and got dressed. Then I made breakfast. I had toast with avocado and a cup of tea. After breakfast, I checked my emails and replied to a few urgent messages.
That sounds like a productive morning. I noticed you used took, had, and checked, all irregular verbs, and you used replied, which is a regular verb ending in ed.
That's right. And I think it's helpful to notice that we often use time expressions when talking about yesterday, like yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening, or last night.
Exactly. These time expressions help make it clear that we're talking about the past. You could also say, yesterday I, or last night I.
That's so true. Let's continue with our day. James, what did you do yesterday afternoon?
Yesterday afternoon, I had a meeting with my team. We discussed a new project and made some important decisions. After the meeting, I ate lunch at my desk. I had a sandwich and an apple.
That sounds like a busy afternoon. I noticed you used had, discussed, made, ate, and had again. Lots of good past tense verbs there.
Thanks. I try to stay active. What about you, Amelia? What did you do yesterday afternoon?
Yesterday afternoon, I worked on a report that was due today. I concentrated really hard and finished around 4 p.m. Then I took a short break and walked to the nearby coffee shop. I bought a latte and chatted with the barista for a few minutes.
That sounds like a nice break. I noticed you used worked, was, concentrated, finished, took, walked, bought, and chatted. Such a good variety of regular and irregular verbs.
Thank you. I think it's helpful to practice both types of verbs. So what did you do yesterday evening, James?
Yesterday evening, I went to the gym after work. I ran on the treadmill and lifted some weights. After the gym, I drove home and took a shower. Then I cooked dinner. I made pasta with tomato sauce and a salad.
That sounds like a healthy evening. I noticed you used went, ran, lifted, drove, took, cooked, and made. Lots of action verbs there.
Thanks. I try to stay active. What about you, Amelia? What did you do yesterday evening?
Yesterday evening, I met a friend for dinner. We went to a new Italian restaurant that just opened downtown. I ate pizza and my friend had pasta. The food was delicious. After dinner, we walked around the city for a while and then took the subway home.
That sounds like a lovely evening. I noticed you used met, went, opened, ate, had, was, walked, and took. And you used delicious to describe the food, which is a great way to add detail to your story.
That's so true. Adding descriptive words makes your story more interesting and engaging. So what did you do last night, James?
Last night, after dinner, I watched a movie on Netflix. It was a thriller, and it was really exciting. I ate some popcorn while I watched. After the movie, I read a book for a little while and then went to bed around 11 p.m.
That sounds like a relaxing night. I noticed you used watched, was, ate, read, and went. And you described the movie as exciting, which gives us more information about your experience.
Exactly. What about you, Amelia? What did you do last night?
Last night, when I got home, I called my sister. We talked for about an hour about our families and work. After the call, I did some yoga to relax. Then I listened to a podcast while I prepared my clothes for today. I went to bed around 10:30 p.m.
That sounds like a peaceful night. I noticed you used got, called, talked, did, listened, prepared, and went. And you gave us specific details, like talking for about an hour and going to bed at around 10:30 p.m.
That's so true. Adding specific details makes your story more vivid and real. I think we've covered our whole day from morning to night.
We sure have, and we've used so many different past tense verbs. I think it's helpful for our listeners to hear these verbs in context, in natural conversation.
Absolutely. Let's think about some common questions you might ask or answer about yesterday. For example, what did you do yesterday? Or did you have a good day?
Those are perfect. And you could ask more specific questions like, what time did you wake up? Where did you go for lunch? Or who did you talk to last night?
Those are great examples. And I think it's helpful to know that when we answer these questions, we often start with, well, or let me think, to give ourselves a moment to remember.
That's so true. Natural conversation isn't just about correct grammar, it's also about the flow and rhythm of speech.
Exactly. Let's think about some common mistakes that learners make when using the past tense. That could be really helpful for our listeners.
Good question. I think one common mistake is using the present tense instead of the past tense when talking about yesterday, like saying, I wake up at 7 a.m. yesterday, instead of saying, I woke up at 7 a.m. yesterday.
That's such a common mistake. Another one is forgetting to use the correct form of irregular verbs, like saying, I goed to the store, instead of I went to the store.
Oh, that's a big one. And another mistake is using the wrong form of to be in the past. For example, saying, I were at home, instead of I was at home.
That's so true. The verb to be is irregular in the past. I was, you were, he, she, it was, we were, they were. It just takes practice to remember these forms.
Exactly. And I think another common mistake is using the present perfect when they should use the simple past for completed actions yesterday, like saying, I have gone to the gym yesterday, instead of I went to the gym yesterday.
That's such an important point. The present perfect connects the past to the present, so we don't use it with specific past times like yesterday or last night.
Exactly. And I think it's helpful for learners to remember that for regular verbs, the past tense form is the same for all subjects. I walked, you walked, he, she, it walked, we walked, they walked.
That's so true. It's simpler than the present tense in that way. let's think about some strategies for learning and remembering irregular verbs.
Good idea. I think one helpful strategy is to learn them in groups or categories. For example, verbs that don't change in the past, put, hit, cut, or verbs that change their vowel. Sing, sang, begin, began.
That's such a smart approach. Another strategy is to learn them in context. In short stories, it's easier to remember I ate breakfast than just the word ate by itself.
Absolutely. And I think it's helpful to practice them regularly, maybe by describing your day each evening using the past tense.
That's such a great idea. It's like keeping a diary but in spoken form, and it helps reinforce the verb forms in a natural way.
Exactly. And I think it's also helpful to listen to how native speakers use the past tense. You'll pick up the patterns and rhythms naturally.
That's so true. Immersion is such a key part of language learning, and podcasts like ours are perfect for that, aren't they?
Well, I hope so. But seriously, listening to English being used naturally is one of the best ways to improve your own speaking.
Absolutely. Let's think about some different contexts where you might need to talk about yesterday in English. It's not just in language classes, right?
Oh, definitely. You might talk about your yesterday with colleagues at work, with friends when you meet up, or with family members at the dinner table.
That's so true. And the way you talk about your yesterday might change depending on who you're talking to and what you want to emphasize.
Exactly. With close friends, you might share more personal details, while with colleagues, you might focus more on work-related activities.
That's such a good point. And I think it's helpful to practice describing different types of days. Not just your typical day, but also a busy day, a relaxing day, a special day, etc.
Absolutely. And it's also good to learn how to talk about your feelings about yesterday. You could say, I had a great day, or I felt tired all day, or I was so excited about...
That's so true. Adding feelings and reactions makes your story more personal and engaging. Let's think about some more advanced vocabulary for describing yesterday.
Good idea. You could describe your day as hectic, productive, relaxing, stressful, enjoyable, or challenging.
Those are perfect. And you could use more specific verbs and expressions like I rushed to finish my work or I managed to solve a difficult problem.
I like managed to. That's such a useful expression. And you could say, I spent the whole morning in meetings, or I wasted time trying to fix my computer.
Those are great examples. And I think it's helpful to learn some time expressions beyond just yesterday and last night. You could say the day before yesterday, earlier yesterday, or later in the day.
Exactly. And you could be more specific with times, like around 3 p.m. or just before lunch.
That's so true. Let's think about how we can connect ideas when talking about yesterday. We don't just list activities, right?
Absolutely. We use connectors like and, but, so, then, after that, and finally, to link our ideas and create a coherent story.
That's such an important point. These connectors make your speech flow more naturally. For example, I woke up late, so I had to rush to get ready.
Exactly. Or, I wanted to go for a walk, but it started raining, so I stayed home instead.
Those are perfect examples. And I think it's helpful to practice using these connectors to make your stories more interesting and easier to follow.
Absolutely. Let's think about some common phrases we use when talking about yesterday. There are some fixed expressions that are really useful.
Good idea. What are some common phrases you can think of?
Well, there's guess what I did yesterday when you're excited to share something, or you won't believe what happened to me yesterday.
I love those. They're so engaging. What else?
There's yesterday was one of those days when you want to describe a particularly good or bad day, or I had such a busy day yesterday.
Those are perfect. And you could say the best part of my day was, or the worst part of my day was, to highlight specific moments.
Exactly. And I think it's helpful to learn some phrases for responding when someone tells you about their yesterday. You could say, that sounds like a busy day, or, oh no, that must have been difficult.
That's so true. Conversation is a two-way street, and knowing how to respond appropriately is just as important as knowing how to share about yourself.
Absolutely. And I think it's okay to keep it simple when you're starting out. You don't need to tell every detail of your yesterday. Just share a few highlights that give people a sense of how your day went.
That's such good advice. It's about giving a general picture, not a minute-by-minute account.
Exactly. And I think it's also okay to say I had a pretty normal day, or nothing special happened yesterday, if that's the case. Not every day is exciting.
That's so true, and it's important to be able to express that in English too. Let's think about some practice activities our listeners could do to improve their ability to talk about yesterday.
Good idea. Well, the obvious one is to describe your yesterday each evening, either out loud or in writing. Start simple and gradually add more detail. And you could also try to imagine different types of days and describe them, like describe a perfect day or describe a terrible day. That helps you practice different vocabulary and expressions.
I love that idea. And you could also try to compare your yesterday with how you usually spend your days. That's great practice for using both past and present tenses.
Exactly. And for more advanced learners, you could try to write a short story or a blog post about a memorable day. That's a great way to practice descriptive language and narrative tenses.
Those are all fantastic suggestions. I think the key is to make it relevant and personal to you. If you're talking about something that matters to you, you'll be more motivated to learn the language to express it.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. That's how we all learn, isn't it?
That's so true. I think it's helpful to remember that even native speakers sometimes hesitate or correct themselves when they're talking. Language is messy and imperfect, and that's okay.
Exactly. The goal is communication, not perfection. As long as people can understand what you're trying to say about your yesterday, you're succeeding.
That's such an important perspective. Let's think about some different cultural differences in how people talk about their day. That could be really interesting for our listeners.
Oh, definitely. In some cultures, people share a lot of details about their day, while in others, they might be more reserved. It's important to be aware of these differences.
That's so true. And in some cultures, it's common to complain about your day, while in others, people might focus more on the positive aspects.
Exactly. And I think it's great for learners to be able to talk about their own cultural experiences in English. It's a wonderful way to share and learn about different ways of life.
Absolutely. And it's also interesting to think about how the concept of yesterday might be different in different cultures. For some, yesterday might be primarily about work, while for others, it might be more about family or community.
That's such an interesting point. And it just goes to show that language is not just about grammar and vocabulary, it's also about culture and ways of thinking.
That's so true. Well, James, we've covered so much ground today, from basic past tense forms to advanced vocabulary, from common mistakes to learning strategies.
We really have, and I hope our listeners have found it helpful and inspiring. Remember, talking about your yesterday is such a practical and useful skill in English.
Absolutely, and it's a great way to connect with people and share your experiences. Everyone has a yesterday, so it's a topic that connects us all.
Exactly. So keep practicing, keep learning, and don't be afraid to share your yesterdays with others in English.
That's perfect advice. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us on Learning English Studio.
Yes, thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into talking about yesterday in English. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our podcast if you found it helpful.
We'll be back next week with another useful topic for English learners. Until then, keep practicing and have wonderful days and yesterdays.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.